This is the story of how one songwriter, a man who came from a tiny Kentucky town most people have never even heard of, managed to change gospel music forever, and how he almost lost everything along the way. I'm taking you inside the National Quartet Convention, a place where something truly extraordinary happened, something that people are still talking about. But before we get to that unforgettable moment, and trust me when I say you'll want to stay until the very end for this, let me show you why this night carried so much weight. In the next 25 minutes, you'll see the 3 songwriting secrets that made Kirk Talley's music unforgettable. You'll learn why gospel artists say his influence shaped an entire generation. You'll hear about the personal struggle he revealed on stage that night, a confession that brought the entire house down. And then there was the one performance that left everyone, performers and audience members alike, in tears. But before any of that, here's what you have to understand. The National Quartet Convention isn't just another music festival or a casual weekend event. Since 1957, it has been the pilgrimage site for Southern gospel fans. Imagine a gathering that feels like the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and a giant family reunion all blended together. This isn't an event people attend once and forget. No, this is something far more meaningful. Picture going to the same event for 20, 30, even 40 years in a row. In that time, you've watched young artists grow into legends, and then watched those legends age. Some even pass away, their once powerful voices turning into cherished memories. You've witnessed the birth of brand new songs, songs that later became timeless standards. And over the years, you've sung those same songs again and again until they became threads woven into the fabric of your own life story. Every September, these devoted fans make their way to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. They come from tiny southern towns, from bustling northern cities, from farms, suburbs, and everywhere in between. They pack their bags, book their hotel rooms months, sometimes even a full year, in advance. And they begin their journey not solely for the music, though the music is extraordinary. They come because the people who gather there feel like family. This is their tribe. In a world that often feels fractured and divided, the NQC represents something rare, a place where everyone shares the same language, the same values, and the same deep love for a kind of music that speaks directly to the soul. Now, 2024 was unlike any previous convention. This wasn't just another year filled with concerts, workshops, and merchandise tables. This was a tribute night, an evening dedicated entirely to celebrating one man's catalog of songs. A catalog that had literally shaped the genre for more than 3 decades. The organizers knew they needed to create something truly special, something that honored not just the music, but the man behind it and the countless lives those songs had touched. That man was Kirk Talley. If his name doesn't ring a bell for you, his songs absolutely will. He was born in Harlan, Kentucky, deep in coal country, a region where steep mountains surround tight-knit communities, and where faith isn't optional, it's essential, as natural as breathing. Talley grew up in circumstances that shaped everything about his music. His childhood revolved around a tiny church, the kind with worn wooden pews and a slightly out-of-tune piano. On Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, the only form of entertainment was the singing. There were no professional sound systems, no fancy instruments, no dazzling light shows or projection screens. There were only voices, raw, sincere voices, raised in harmony. Faith was expressed through melody. In those early years, young Kirk learned something that would become the foundation of his entire career. He learned that music wasn't about production value or technical perfection. It was about meaning. It was about authenticity. It was about the powerful connection that forms when the human heart reaches towards something greater than itself. He watched elderly women sing with their eyes closed, completely lost in worship. He saw strong men who worked dangerous shifts in the coal mines, break down in tears when a hymn touched them in just the right way. He absorbed the way a single song could change the entire atmosphere in a room, lifting people from fear or grief into a place of hope and peace. For many who attend events like the NQC, gospel music isn't background noise. It's the anchor that held them steady through divorce, disease, and death. Remember that detail, because it explains the tears, the raised hands, and the voices singing so loudly the walls seemed to shake during the tribute. Here's what set Talley apart from many other songwriters, and this is crucial to understanding why his music has endured when so many gospel songs fade away after just a few years. Talley wrote from the pew, not from the stage. What does that mean? In the gospel world, most songwriters are performers first. They stand on stage, watch what gets a reaction from the audience, learn the technical details of arrangement and music theory, and write songs with those mechanics in mind. There's nothing wrong with that approach. It produces some excellent music. But Talley's process was entirely different. He lived first. He struggled. He questioned. He wrestled with doubt, fear, and pain. And only after walking through those valleys did he write. His music didn't come from a desire to create a radio hit or win an award. It came from the trenches of real life. When he wrote about grace, it was because he deeply needed grace. When he wrote about redemption, it was because he understood what it meant to need redeeming. When he wrote about God's unfailing love, it was because he had tested that love in his darkest moments and found it to be real. That authenticity became his signature. Listeners could sense it immediately. You can't fake that kind of honesty. You can't manufacture genuine emotion. And in a genre that is sometimes criticized for being too polished or too perfect, Talley's raw honesty was like cool, fresh water in a desert. People were thirsty for music that acknowledged that faith didn't erase problems. They needed songs that gave them permission to hurt and still believe, to question and still trust, to struggle and still hold on. Over 3 decades, Talley wrote hit after hit. The Love of God became a wedding staple. I Just Came to Praise the Lord became a church anthem. Who Am I became the song people turned to when they needed to remember their worth. But these songs were more than just successful. They became part of people's lives. They were sung at funerals, giving voice to both grief and hope. They were played in hospital rooms and rehabilitation centers, reminding people they were not alone. When you look closely at Talley's biggest hits, 3 patterns emerge. The first is his use of a question format. Take Who Am I as the perfect example. It starts not with a declaration, but with a question. This is psychological brilliance. Questions activate the listener's brain. A statement can be passive, but a question demands engagement. The second pattern is the journey from personal to universal. His songs often begin in the first person. I just came to praise the Lord. But by the chorus, the I transforms into we. The personal becomes communal. This mirrors the real experience of faith, which begins privately but ultimately connects people together. That's why these songs work whether you're alone in your car at 2 a.m. or standing in an arena surrounded by thousands. The third pattern is the redemption arc. Every Talley song takes listeners on a journey. Struggle, surrender, transformation. The song begins in difficulty, acknowledges pain honestly, then moves towards surrender, the turning point, and finally ends in transformation. The ending is different from the beginning. This mirrors the structure of powerful movies and stories because the human brain is wired to respond to transformation narratives. During the tribute, several artists stepped onto the stage to share how Talley's music shaped their careers. One well-known gospel artist opened up about a vulnerable moment. He said, I was ready to quit music. I was broke. My record label dropped me, and I was packing up my equipment to sell it. Then, as he was sinking into despair, one of Kirk's songs came over the radio, a song about redemption. He broke down in tears, realizing that his story wasn't over. He went on to write his next album in just 3 weeks, and that album changed everything. The NQC organizers had also collected video testimonies from fans. In one clip, an elderly woman shared that the love of God had been her late husband's favorite song for 47 years. After he passed away from cancer, she couldn't listen to it for 2 years. Eventually, she realized that avoiding the song was like avoiding her memories of him. Now, she plays it regularly and feels connected not only to her husband, but also to her faith. Another testimony came from a middle-aged man who had been an alcoholic for 20 years, losing his family and his job. During his time in a faith-based rehab program, someone sang, "Who am I?" The lyrics about unworthiness and unconditional love hit him deeply. That song became his anchor during recovery. Today, he has been sober for 8 years and has reunited with his children. When the tribute celebration finally began, the atmosphere was electric. The lights dimmed, and the opening notes of "The Love of God" filled the room. This song, foundational to so many people, is often described as the one that made divine love feel real. As the vocalist began to sing, something extraordinary unfolded. If you watch the videos from that night, you'll see people mouthing every word, their eyes closed, their faces full of emotion, completely absorbed in a moment that felt sacred. Some people in the audience were gently swaying, while others stood motionless with tears streaming down their faces. Neuroscience actually helps explain this reaction. When we hear music that is tied to deeply emotional memories, the brain releases the same chemicals it did during those original moments. So these individuals weren't simply remembering their wedding day or their mother's funeral. They were reliving those experiences. The joy, the grief, the awe, all of it came rushing back as if no time had passed. Performance after performance continued, with each artist offering their own interpretation while still honoring the original version. They weren't trying to replicate every note exactly. Instead, they were exploring what the song meant to them personally. Some arrangements stayed traditional, while others were unexpectedly innovative. And within that variety lies an important lesson for anyone involved in creative work. The greatest tributes don't try to copy. They remix, they reinterpret, and they honor the source by adding something new. Suddenly, the entire auditorium joined in, not as background singers, but as one unified choir. Thousands of voices blended together, forming an overwhelming wall of sound that filled every corner of the room. Psychology research actually shows that singing together can synchronize people's heartbeats. This isn't a poetic metaphor, it's a measurable biological reality. In that single moment, thousands of hearts were literally beating in unison. And then, without any announcement or introduction, Kirk Talley himself walked onto the stage. The reaction was explosive. The roar of the crowd was deafening. People leaped to their feet, some shouting in excitement, while others stood completely frozen in stunned silence. But what truly made the evening transcendent wasn't the surprise appearance. It was what Talley did next. He didn't sing, he spoke. And what he shared broke hearts and healed them at the same time. He talked openly about his struggles, the battles he fought in public, the demons. When he wanted to quit, not just music, but life itself, the crowd grew completely silent, every person holding on to his words. Then he said something unforgettable. "These songs that you've been singing tonight, I need you to understand something. They weren't written for you. They were written to me from God so I could survive. You just happen to need them too." Think about the weight of that. The Psalms that ministered to millions were first medicine for the songwriter's own soul. When he wrote the line, "Who am I?" he genuinely didn't know the answer. He was wrestling with feelings of unworthiness. The song wasn't polished theology. It was a desperate question. And this reveals a powerful truth about art itself. We create in order to heal ourselves. And yet, somehow, those creations end up healing others too. Talley didn't sugarcoat anything about his journey. He acknowledged the valleys, the failures, the moments when taking even one more step felt impossible. And then he said something profoundly comforting. The same faith that saves you also sustains you, not by removing the struggle, but by remaining present in the struggle. So much religious teaching suggests that faith will erase problems, but real faith doesn't eliminate difficulty. It walks with you through difficulty. It doesn't answer every question. It simply holds your hand while you wrestle with them. That message resonated deeply because finally, someone was speaking aloud what so many had experienced but were afraid to say. Here was a respected voice admitting that the Christian life is hard, that doubt is not a failure, that struggle is not a sign of spiritual weakness, but part of the journey. So why does Kirk Talley's music endure while so many songs fade into obscurity? After watching this celebration, hearing the testimonies, analyzing the patterns, and seeing how people responded, it becomes clear that his work rests on three essential foundations. First is emotional honesty. Talley never pretended that faith was easy or that doubt made someone weak. His songs give permission to struggle. They make space for questions, for fear, for the feeling of being abandoned. And because his music doesn't lie or pretend, people trust it. They return to it because it feels real. Second is melodic memory. The melodies he crafts are unforgettable in the best sense. Once you hear them, they stay with you. They're simple enough for anyone to sing, regardless of musical background, but still rich and interesting, even after countless repetitions. That balance is incredibly rare. Many simple songs get boring. Many complex ones feel unreachable. Talley found a sweet spot where simplicity and sophistication meet perfectly. Third is universal specificity. This phrase may seem contradictory, but it describes exactly why his lyrics resonate so strongly. His songs are specific enough to sound personal and authentic, drawn from real emotional experiences. Yet they're framed in a way that speaks to everyone. Who Am I? Came from a particular moment in his life, but it also reflects a question every human being asks eventually. That blend of the intimate and the universal makes his music feel both deeply personal and widely relatable. The influence on future generations was obvious throughout the NQC celebration. Young artists in their 20s and 30s sang these songs with the same passion and conviction as the 70-year-olds who first heard them decades ago. This kind of intergenerational connection is extremely rare. Usually, musical tastes separate generations. Parents and children argue over what's worth listening to. But Talley's music bridges that divide. Grandparents, parents, and grandchildren can all find me. That's the very definition of legacy, when your work outlives you and continues speaking to the next generation and the next after that. Talley's songs are being covered by young musicians, reimagined with new arrangements, and introduced to audiences who weren't even born when the originals were released. Yet these new listeners connect with the songs just as deeply. Times change, trends shift, and circumstances evolve, but the human emotions and spiritual needs his music speaks to remain unchanged. At the convention, artists and industry professionals also discussed the broader impact his work has had on gospel music as a whole. Talley's vulnerability, his commitment to authenticity, and his refusal to write merely for commercial appeal shaped an entire generation of gospel musicians. His example showed them that you don't have to sacrifice artistic integrity to reach people, that in many cases, the most honest and uncompromising songs end up being the most impactful and commercial. The 2024 celebration wasn't simply about one songwriter, even though his contribution is enormous. It was also a statement about the lasting power of Southern gospel music itself. In a world where traditional genres often struggle for relevance, where attention spans shrink and musical trends shift rapidly, the packed auditorium, filled with people of all ages, proved something important. Authentic artistry still matters. Music that springs from genuine faith and real human experience still reaches people. So here's what you should understand as all of this comes together. The National Quartet Convention 2024 tribute to Kirk Talley wasn't merely a concert or a ceremony. It was a masterclass in the power of authentic creativity. It showed what happens when someone writes from truth instead of trends, when they create for healing rather than applause, when they value honesty over perfection.